Krishna. Krishna's not different from his name. Oh, how do you like that? Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna. Okay. This is Biography. 6 volumes. This is volume 1. Henry Boland. Krishna. Volume 1. Before A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Prabhupada, Acharya left India. So he's still struggling in India. And he's in New Delhi. And sometimes he's not even eating. But he's going to the printer to try to get his Back to Godheads printed. And he's sending them all around the world. He doesn't have proper clothing. It's 40 degrees. It's winter in New Delhi. And he has rubber shoes. And he doesn't even have a wrap or anything. Just a light little cotton jacket. And he doesn't have anywhere to live. He's living here in this home with these people for a few days. Here in this home with somebody else. But he's fully absorbed in his mission to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the entire world, to solve all the problems of the world, and to deliver everyone. And here he is, a pauper with nothing, struggling in New Delhi. But he's writing government officials, he's writing to whoever will listen to him. And sometimes they're saying, go away, we're not interested, we don't want you here, go away. And they're telling him, we don't have time for this. India now has to get modern to keep up with the world. We don't have time for this back to Godhead. And that's what got us backward to begin with. That's why we've been backward all these years. It's because of all this religion stuff. We don't want that now. This is what he's dealing with. He says 90% of the people he's meeting, and this is in India, are actually atheists. They don't believe in God. They don't want God. They're busy doing something else. He said 90%. And that's India. I mean, you kind of expect that in the West, that there'll be a lot of atheists, but not in India. About 90%. The minute he brings up Godhead and he says, oh, go away, we don't want this. Hare Krishna. So he's continuing to struggle in New Delhi. There's a couple pages to the end of this torturous section. It's about 1956, right around there. So he's writing, these are some quotes from the articles he's writing and the letters he's writing. So this was where he was at the time. He quoted former President, those who unlawfully accumulated money would find it snatched away by taxes for wars and other agents of illusory nature in the shape of medical practitioners, lawyers, tax collectors, societies, constitutions, so-called sadhus, famines, earthquake, and many such calamities. So those who unlawfully accumulated money would find it snatched away. And this is a quote from an article entitled Progressive Ambition and Unsatiated Lust. Choked on that one. It was titled Progressive Ambition and Unsatiated Lust. This is a paragraph from that article. A miser who hesitated to purchase a copy of Back to Godhead by the dictation of illusory energy spent up 20,000 rupees for a week's ailments and died at the end. A similar thing happened when a man who refused to spend a pice for the service of the Lord spoiled 30,000 rupees in litigation affairs between members of the home. That's the law of nature. A worker in New Delhi post office, noticing the title of the magazines Abai was sending abroad, took the opportunity to argue his atheistic opinions with Abai. So this is in the post office. He saw the Back to Godhead title. He wants to argue. So Srila Prabhupada says, the postmaster was an Arya Samaji, and he was talking to me about the paper Back to Godhead. He raised the question, if we do our duty nicely, then what is the use of worshipping God? If we become honest, we become moral. If we do not do anything which is harmful to anyone, if we act in this way, then what is the need of this? Because our paper's name was Back to Godhead, he was indirectly protesting, what is the use of propagating this philosophy of Godhead if we act nicely? That is the Arya Samajist view, how to avoid God. So I replied that if one is not God conscious, he cannot be a moralist, he cannot be truthful, he cannot be honest. This is our point of view. You study the whole world just on these 3 points: morality, honesty, dutifulness. But if he is not God conscious, he cannot continue such things. To revive all these good qualities in society, you first have to invoke God consciousness. A Delhi man, noticing Abai distributing Back to Godhead, remarked, "Where is Godhead? Can you show me God?" Abai replied to the challenge, but he also pondered deeply a reply as he moved through the city during the day. On returning to his room, he began an article. Where is Godhead? Is it possible to see him? So this is from that article. So when the man asked that question, Prabhupada replied to him on the spot something, we don't know what. But then he was thinking about it all day, and he wanted to write about that. So it was a good question. So this is from what Prabhupada wrote later on. In the Secretariat buildings in New Delhi, there's an inscription on the stone that liberty does not descend upon a people, but has to be earned before it can be enjoyed. Actually, this is the fact, and we have seen it, that much sacrifice has to be rendered by the people of India before they could gain Swaraj. But in the matter of Godhead, some irresponsible people ask, where is God? Can you show me? Have you seen God? These are some of the questions put forward by some irresponsible men who want to have everything very cheap. If for attaining a temporary false sense of liberty in this material world, so much labor and sacrifice have to be requisitioned, is it possible to see Godhead, the absolute truth, so cheaply? To see God means complete liberty from all conditions. But is Godhead an attending orderly, so that he may be present at my command? The atheist, however, demands like that. If Godhead is a paid servant, as if Godhead is a paid servant, and he thinks Godhead is an imaginary thing, otherwise, he would have appeared before us as soon as the demand to see him is made. One time, while he was walking on a secluded street, pursuing his Back to Godhead duties, a stray cow, the kind seen wandering in the streets of India's town and city, suddenly charged him, goring his side with her horn, and knocked him down. At first he couldn't get up, and no one came to help him. As he lay there, he wondered why it had happened. Summer came, and the 110-degree heat made it almost intolerable to spend time out of doors. Hot, dust-laden winds blew in the city streets. Street-side hawkers closed their businesses during the day. In early May, during 112-degree heat, a man collapsed in the street and died of heat stroke. But Abai ignored the heat and the ordinary limitations of the body. One day, while delivering back to Godhead to various addresses in the city, Abai suddenly began reeling, half unconscious, overcome by the heat. At that very moment, an acquaintance of his, a man he had approached during his preaching, happened to be passing by in his car, and he took Abai to a doctor. The doctor diagnosed him as a victim of heat stroke and ordered him to rest. On June 20, Abai produced the 8th consecutive fortnightly edition of the year, its front page article condemning both materialistic family life and false renunciation of family life. It had been almost 2 years exactly since he had left his home and taken to Vanaprastha order, and his comments on family life seemed autobiographical as well as scriptural. He quoted a statement by Prahlad Maharaj from Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a little quote here. Persons who are always disturbed in mind with cares and anxieties of household affairs may quit off the place which is the black hole, temporary abode, family life, to kill oneself and take shelter under the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead by entering into the forest. It's the title of the chapter, Crying Alone in the Wilderness. It's like Prabhupada is in a wild forest, a jungle, all alone. And he admitted, the management of a family is more difficult than that of an empire. But trying to avoid family life by living in the jungle without the real spirit of renunciation was monkey renunciation. In the jungle there were many monkeys who lived naked, ate fruits, and kept female companions. Another little quote here. The real remedy lies in the act of accepting the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. That makes one free from all cares and anxieties of life. That makes one able to see Godhead always and everywhere. Real renounced life, therefore, was possible without going into the forest. Even if one remains in the dress of a householder, he could be freed from cares and anxieties by engaging himself in devotional service. On September 1st, the U.S. President Eisenhower condemned the Soviets' secret testing of a nuclear bomb equal to 1 million tons of TNT and scoffed at the Soviets' claims for peace. In the Mideast, Egypt's Nasser nationalized the operation of the Suez Canal, causing an international crisis. So it was like, up to that point it had been an international pathway, and Egypt's Nasser now said, no, it belongs to Egypt. Nationalized it. On September 20, 81 nations met at the UN to form a new international agency to help tame the atom for peaceful purposes. Abai saw some of the headlines and heard talk of the latest news from gentlemen he visited. He frankly told them, without Krishna consciousness, the promises of cooperation by the politicians were all phantasmagoria. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said that if only one soul could be turned into a pure devotee, his mission would be a success. Yet sometimes Abai became overwhelmed when he thought of how small he was, how much work had to be done on behalf of Krishna, and how difficult it was to convince even one conditioned soul. Prabhupada always remained small. He didn't get big. Even though so many big, incredible things were going on all around him by his influence, he himself, he always remained small. He didn't get like big. He was always big like this, but he didn't get like big. Hare Krishna. I wanted to read just a little bit of chapter 9 to get some relief from this New Delhi hell. And this is chapter 9. It's entitled A Resident of Vrindavan. So Prabhupada goes to Vrindavan. And there's a little paragraph here to begin the chapter. I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing. My godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted. Practically, my spiritual master insisted. Prabhupada had had that dream. Take sannyas. He had it, I think, twice. He wanted to become a preacher, so he forced me through his godbrother. You accept. So, unwillingly, I accepted. The passenger cars behind the locomotive moved forward almost silently. Thumping at a slow rhythm over the tracks, the train pulled out of the station, past freight yards, a neighborhood of run-down tenements, the old Delhi fort, the garbage dump at Nizamuddin, with its hundreds of crows and vultures flying overhead, and then past a marble-domed red sandstone mosque. Seated in a third-class compartment, his luggage stored beneath his seat, Abai could see factory workers walking near the tracks, carrying their lunches in metal tiffins, and then the factory surrounded by huts of mud and straw. He passed the thatched roofs and tarpaulin tents, the cow-dung fires that smoked in the morning air, the tall stacks of the Indraprasthra electrical powerhouse spewed out a different smoke, and sooty black clouds poured back from the locomotive. He saw red and violet wildflowers blooming from bramble bushes at trackside, and beyond he saw the road to Mathura with its border of fruitless kikar trees. It was the morning train to Agra, and there were few passengers. Abai would be riding as far as Mathura, and then traveling by Tanga to Vrindavan. He had ridden widely the Indian Railway, especially in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, when he had traveled on business to Bengal, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh. He had been to Vrindavan several times. In his childhood reveries over the train tables, it had been the first place he had thought of visiting. His first visit was 1925, had been but a brief pilgrimage while he had been in nearby Agra on business. Then, 1932, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had been in Vrindavan on parikram. That had been a memorable visit. Abai had heard him speak at Koshi, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had marked him. He likes to hear. And then, at Radhakund 3 years later, he had been with his spiritual master again. But he had never gone like this, to live there. Dressed in a simple white dhoti, his hand in his bead bag, fingering his japa beads, he looked out the window, quietly chanting the holy name. The train passed through the dense thickets of Faridabad and into the agricultural fields with their interspersed patches of wheat, dal, and sugarcane, beginning at trackside and stretching for half a mile to the dry, uncultivated land that continued as far as the eye could see. The train sped fast. Rural villages drifted past the windows. An hour out of Delhi, the land was mostly flat and open, dotted with small villages. Occasionally, he would glimpse a striking old temple, but mostly it was the land, now barren, with a few palm trees, now cultivated with irrigated fields, under the expanse of blue sky and blazing sun. For a long time, Abai had wanted to take shelter in Vrindavan, and now there was no obstacle. His purpose remained the same. He would write back to Godhead and deliver to the printer in Delhi fortnightly. As long as he could afford to travel, he would return to Delhi to distribute back to Godhead, but he would live in the shelter of Vrindavan. He had in mind the room at the Vamsi Gopalaji temple near Keshigat, a rooftop room that commanded a view of almost all of Vrindavan, and since his 1953 visit from Jhansi, he had kept in touch with the temple manager. In moving to Vrindavan, Abai was following his predecessor spiritual masters. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktivedanta Thakur had had their house at Radhakund and had preached in Vrindavan. Gorkishore Das Babaji, Jagannath Das Babaji, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Narottam Das Thakur had lived either in Vrindavan or in Navadvip, near the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya and his immediate followers had an especially intimate relationship with Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya had commissioned Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami to uncover the places of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan that over the centuries had become lost. Rupa and Sanatana had left their prestigious government posts and gone to live in Vrindavan. Dressed in simple loincloths, they had lived without fixed residence, staying each night under a different tree. They and Jiva Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, known and worshipped as the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, had compiled a voluminous literature on Krishna Bhakti. They had inspired wealthy Vaishnav patrons to erect Vrindavan's great temples. Govindaji, Madan Mohan, Radha Damodar, Radha Raman. At Radhakund, shortly after Lord Chaitanya's departure from the world, Raghunath Das Goswami had chanted 100,000 names of Krishna and discoursed for several hours daily on the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. There also, Krishnadas Kaviraj had compiled Chaitanya Charitamrita, describing the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Even those Gaudiya Vaishnavas who did not live in Vrindavan kept Vrindavan always in their hearts and proclaimed its glories. The Chaitanya Charitamrita describes the great ecstasy Lord Chaitanya felt while traveling from Puri to Vrindavan. Quote, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was absorbed in ecstatic love of Jagannath Puri. But when he passed along the road on the way to Vrindavan, that love increased 100 times. The Lord's ecstatic love increased 1,000 times when he visited Mathura, but it increased 100,000 times when he wandered in the forests of Vrindavan. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was elsewhere, the very name of Vrindavan was sufficient to increase his ecstatic love. Now, when he was actually traveling in the Vrindavan forest, his mind was absorbed in great ecstatic love, day and night. He ate and bathed simply out of habit. Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita. Yet Long time no see. Krishna. Well, I gotta do a bunch of stuff. And hopefully tonight meet with devotees online and we'll chant japa together and, share a little something here and there. Hare Krishna.